Here, the old god of war in these lands, who is dead.
Well, for a dead man, Odin seemed pretty keen on seeing he wasn't found.
God of War Ragnarok will be the best game in the series if it continues doing this, and this, and also this. Ragnarok is coming, and never did I ever think to say that I'm excited for the end of the world until we realized the end of the world I'm referring to is about a video game where it looks like everything is seriously culminating to an epic finale for Kratos' saga in the Norse realms. Against many expectations that fans had, thinking this new saga for Kratos in Norse mythology would comprise itself among a trilogy of games, it has been confirmed by the talented studio at Sony Santa Monica that Kratos' god-slaying and journey through parenthood would peak at the aptly named God of War Ragnarok, the second game in the Norse saga. The first game was excellent. So good, in fact, that the developers are cramming in a massive new game that finishes off Kratos' time in the Norse realm by being the largest, most substantial, and perhaps the best entry in the long-running franchise. In this video, we are going to take a look at the 3 things that could make God of War Ragnarok the pinnacle of the series. This is the first in a multi-part series where I will be discussing the all-new God of War Ragnarok and why this game could be the biggest single-player game of this generation. God of War 2018, commonly referred as God of War 4, was heralded as a near-perfect way to reboot a dormant franchise, completely rewriting how God of War was played by removing the fixed camera perspective during Kratos' previous outings in ancient Greek mythology, creating a massive new interconnected world with a fully operational camera in a new setting of Norse mythology, and adding hours upon hours of completely optional, yet completely worthwhile side content, among other things, is how God of War 2018 managed to recapture fans of God of War and bring the franchise into an entirely new era with a new focus. Because God of War Ragnarok is a continuation of the foundation that the previous game built, Ragnarok needs only to further refine these qualities of the previous titles, rather than rewriting the book again. In simpler terms, God of War Ragnarok needs to be an extension of the previous game with more refinement in all the qualities it brought to the table. I've broken down these qualities into 3 key ingredients that made God of War 2018 so successful, and all Ragnarok needs to do is further expand on these elements to give us the best God of War game in the series. Quality number 1 is without a doubt the sheer size of the game world and its scale. The first set of God of War games that took place in ancient Greek mythology did a masterful way of conveying the scope with the impressive and dramatic camera pans. God of War 2018 went away with a lot of the pans and gave you an in-your-face look into the expansiveness of the game world by making you feel incredibly small, regardless of Kratos' insane body mass, by having the game's levels show off its sheer size with stunning vistas and moments like this. And this. And we can't forget about this, can we? The World Serpent was such an amazing moment that served as an entity that expanded the game world further and further as the Lake of the Nine's decreasing water levels gave way to more exciting and often completely optional areas. If God of War Ragnarok can continue this new formula by expanding on the scope of the game, both in its set pieces and in the total area of its world, then surely this new entry in the series will be a hit. This segues into my second key point, giving the player new realms, locations, quests, and incentives to explore off the beaten path. God of War, when it was set in ancient Greece, had players on a very fixed linear path, where the only deviation off the main path led to hidden treasure chests, and sometimes these minigames that rewarded the player with extra experience points, or boosts in the player's stats. God of War 2018 gave players a much larger game world to roam around in and explore, as everything was intrinsically connected to the Lake of the Nine, which served as the game's ever-expanding hub. This game design, along with handing out generous key items and weapons that unlocked further exploration of areas that were otherwise previously blocked off, incentivized players to continue treading off the game's desired path. The game's Metroidvania elements to it proved to be highly successful and never felt like a chore to revisit some older areas to get access to sweet new loot and exceptional bosses. Just when you thought Midgard was the only realm to explore, Kratos and Atreus found themselves able to explore brand new realms that further expanded the already massive game. God of War Ragnarok can further capitalize on the realm hopping by allowing players to explore more fleshed out areas of these realms, and by giving players full access to all the realms in Norse mythology, as the previous game had a few of the realms completely inaccessible. Being as God of War Ragnarok is indeed the final installment in Kratos' journey to the Norse realms, it would only make sense for the game to give players ample reason to traverse all these realms. With many gods and key figures left to encounter, the story and optional gameplay could greatly benefit by opening the game world up to incorporating more fleshed out expanses to be explored within these realms. Before we get to my final point, let me remind you to send that world serpent to swallow the like button and push this video out to more people and help me against the YouTube algorithm. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more game previews, reviews, and tips and tricks videos, and expect a great deal more of God of War content coming up real soon. Thank you again, good people, for all the support. Our final quality. Continue the excellent storytelling by shining proper length on the game's supporting cast.
I know the truth isn't simple, but nothing is when it involves your child.
Kratos and Atreus are both incredible characters who've seen considerable growth during the previous game. Kratos in particular has seen the bulk of this as his new role as a single father trying to raise a son while contending with his troubled and violent past has made for some of the most fun and interesting transformations in video game storytelling. This time, I believe myself and the entire fanbase of God of War would really like to see the game's supporting cast receive their due share of the spotlight.
I finally understand. I'm dangling from the hip of the bloody ghost of Sparta.
Do not call me that.
Mimir was easily one of the greatest characters introduced in the previous game, as his wit and comical way of seeing life, even though reduced to just his head, made so much of the latter part of the game interesting and fun to listen to his wisdom and stories. Freya and Baldur were also done quite well in the previous title, but I am hoping for more exposition surrounding some of the other gods and prominent figures in Norse mythology. We know Kratos will encounter Thor in Ragnarok, and various other gods, and I'm hoping for more work into fleshing these characters out and not just there to serve as epic boss fights. As we can learn from Mimir, Freya, Baldur, and the exceptional Brock and Sindri, God of War Ragnarok will surely excel with more of the storytelling and can benefit even more by giving more exposition by sharing the spotlight with the new characters introduced in God of War Ragnarok. Now, there are, of course, many other things that God of War 2018 did that are exceptional, including its new combat and RPG-like progression. But these three key qualities that I mentioned in this video can further elevate God of War Ragnarok to be heralded as the greatest entry in the series and perhaps the greatest game of 2022. As a huge fan of the franchise, I cannot wait to play this game when it releases this fall. But now on to you. What do you think about God of War Ragnarok? And what are you most looking forward to in this game? Let me know in the comments, and I'll invite you again to Thor's hammer that like and subscribe button for more content surrounding God of War and other big names in the industry. Stay tuned for the next video in this series about how God of War Ragnarok can improve upon some of the aspects of the previous game that didn't quite work out as well as other aspects. Thank you again for all the support, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace!